Christian.
Hi, I'm Tara. As mentioned before, I'm a first-year student here at Montgomery College. I became familiar with COGx my junior year of high school, and I'm currently training with them for the National Memory Championship. My question for the panel is that I have benefited from applying concepts of neuroscience and cognitive science to my own learning, but I am just one of many students here at Montgomery College. Which students do you think would benefit most from what we're discussing here today, and how specifically do you think they will benefit? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to a meeting we had, I guess, 3 years ago, Tara, when we had just met you, and we walked into the principal's office at Walt Whitman High School, where you were a student at the time. And at the end of the meeting, I noticed you were carrying a book by Leo Tolstoy, which is Anna Karenina. And I asked you at the door if you remembered the first line of that book. And you said, "No, what a weird question, this guy's weird." But apart from that, the first line of the book says, "All happy families have something in common. Unhappy families are unique," or something to that effect. So to answer your question, going back to the book you were reading when we met 3 years ago, I believe all successful learners have something in common, and struggling learners are unique. So in terms of who can benefit, anyone that wants to understand the principles of successful learning, because we're not born with them and they're not usually explicitly taught to us at a macro level. At an individualized level, anyone that struggles to learn and can benefit from optimizing that process is somebody that can benefit from marginally to greatly. And in your case, you're somebody we're incredibly proud of. Tara is actually a 4.0 student at Montgomery College and hopeful to go to Columbia soon. And we hope to replicate these cases at Montgomery College. She's just a star at COGx and at Montgomery College. So thank you for being here, Tara, and for your question. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is more Javier's realm than mine, but I will say the following. From a psychology perspective, the question often comes up of who will benefit from some sort of therapy. And one of the critical questions is that the person is engaged in the process. So I would imagine the optimal student would be one that, yes, is facing challenges, but that is maybe still at the point of being angry about it, and not at the point of being, like Javier at one point said, I felt I could never learn. That's got to be a tricky place to pull somebody from. I think you want to catch them before that. And so I would imagine a really important role would be identifying people who are having some challenges and trying to intervene while they still don't feel that it's beyond their reach.
That's a good point.
So, Gina Wesley, thank you very much for inviting me here. My question is, having been on your journey to get to where you are now, was there a certain book or a body of research that you felt was very influential in that journey and that you would recommend maybe for people who are interested in pursuing understanding the neuroscience of learning? Would you recommend a book or a body of research to help them on that path?
Wow. I'm trying to think of a single source. So, I mean, the first, this isn't meant as a cop-out, but the first thought that came to my mind would be a person I would recommend, which is a person named Carol Rollheiser at our Center for Teaching Support and Innovation. But to generalize from Carol, that virtually every campus has some sort of Center of Teaching and Learning, and they are invariably full of people who are really passionate about pedagogy and who understand the area well. So for me, that was probably more powerful than any book. I've read a lot of books, but I think coming into contact with these people who were passionate about it, who really knew the science behind it, and embracing the knowledge they bring and working with them, I think that was, for me, the most transformational sort of outside source of information I interacted with.
I don't know if this would be a cop-out, but we're in the same city and you're about to take a sabbatical, and what we do for a living is synthesize.
Yeah, all the time.
I would share with you whatever we actually synthesize, summarize white papers, research, and books, and we have it classified as neatly as we can in Dropbox, and I'm happy to share with you as little or as much as you want. But we have this by area. and I'm happy to share whatever you want.
I think let me take a second kick at it. One of the books that did come up earlier that maybe we will highlight again is this book called Moonwalking with Einstein, because I think the reason I would recommend that, or what it helps me at least communicate to other people, is that cognitive skills, in that case like memory, information storing memory and being able to retrieve it successfully later, it is not the case that certain people are really good at it and certain people are doomed to never be good at it. What that book shows is that just about anybody who's willing to put in the time and the effort and that repeated deliberate practice can enhance a skill like memory. Now there's a lot of discussion in that book about how much you want to do that right. and whether there's a reason or two or not. But I think that's a very good book for showing that basic principle that I think both Javier and I believe in quite passionately.
May I comment?
Yes, Susan.
Okay, yeah, I have read that book, and I want to put in my recommendation just because I think, like what you said, I'd read The Growth Mindset, and I've heard about grit, and but the Moonwalking with Einstein was the first real crack in my construct of what I thought was possible. And so that crack then led to all the other areas where you realize it's not set that there is these capabilities, and I'm sure with your training for these memory competitions,
Oh, it's been a
like
valuable book.
yeah,
It's actually one
and
of the
just
first books I read when I decided to train for the National Memory Championship, and it's amazing in terms of someone who's training to compete at a national level in terms of what it teaches you about what you need to do and why you're doing it. It gives you kind of, I think, a holistic approach to what you should be doing, what should be going on in your mind.
yeah, the why you're doing it, like
Yes.
explaining why it works.
It gives you a genuine reason that you can hold on to.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and I now have 13 random facts in my head that'll never, I'll never lose. Thank you.
There's a deletion tool, I think.
No, I know. I need to
explains how to
yeah,
delete.
yeah.
So I work in student affairs, and we're largely educators outside of the classroom. So if you can share what from your research or personal experience might have lessons or application for our work with students in that area.
Can you please elaborate for me what you mean by outside of the classroom?
Sure. My particular area happens to be access, so it's the response center, the welcome centers, and the recruitment area. We also have counseling faculty. We have people in financial aid, admissions, records and registration as an example.
Do you have?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we've had a bit of a discussion about this today, and I have to say it was very provocative. It got me thinking about a lot of things. One of the things we sometimes see at higher institutions is this distinction between staff and faculty, as though we have very distinct roles, but we're all educators, and in fact, to some extent, the challenges that students are facing outside the classroom are more real and relevant to them than the challenges that they face inside the classroom. So I actually think if, to the extent that staff can think of themselves as educators as well and can understand that when this student has a real problem that's facing them that they feel personally engaged in wanting to solve. I mean, problem-based learning is one of the most effective forms of learning, and so we try to create that in the classroom, right? We try to give them a problem. If they come to you with a real important problem to them, they are engaged, they are ready to think, and you certainly have me thinking that if we could have everybody who interacts with them thinking of themselves as educators and having a sense of how to take that teachable moment, as it were, and get the most out of it, that there's a lot of value, and that's one place I think we could really increase what we do. And I also think, by the way, the whole dynamic that sets, that we're all helping you develop as individuals, is a really good dynamic for every university and every college to embrace, I think.
I think back to my own experience when I enrolled here. I found confidence and community in the pool table, and there was there was a little room that was hidden that nobody knew. I wish I would have found it somewhere else because I was really good at pool, but it wasn't really getting me anywhere. And when I dropped out, I thought I was going to be a professional pool player until somebody hustled me, and I realized I was pretty bad. But
Pure learning.
That's peer-based learning. So I would love to see if I have had a less than perfect experience learning in the past, and you're telling me that you distribute content that I have to master, show me a bridge and by show me a bridge that allows me to feel confident that I can cross and learn, then the most welcoming thing that I would like to see at a community college is some interactive mechanism by which I can learn about my own brain and how I actually learn. And if we kept this as an ongoing task that is peer-based as well as every level of, regardless of what you teach, we're just lifting metacognition and actual cognition so that students just become better, savvier operators of their own brain, I think that that becomes really interesting because that's kind of the common glue that we're all trying to understand in order to succeed. And there's got to be an incremental way of doing this through pilots that scale up, that can have components that are student-led, that are faculty-led, and a combination of both, and even technology-led, so that you can take little quizzes and that are highly interactive and not threatening. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now we can open it up to the floor. We have some time. It's 15 minutes. Is there a question? If there's a question from the floor, I do have a question from Twitter. While you're thinking about it, I will read this one for the panel, but we do have some time where you can accept questions from the floor. The questions for the panel is, what can be done for MC students who have immigrated to the US in recent years and have cognitive challenges but remain undiagnosed? What can be done for MC students who have immigrated to the United States in recent years and have cognitive challenges but remain undiagnosed?
Can I try? So there are two words that would easily throw us off that I don't want to ignore. So she says immigrated and undiagnosed. So the fact that you immigrated might be important if you're struggling to learn English as a second language, and it's kind of a prerequisite for English instruction. Let's assume that you, at this point, that's not the issue. And then undiagnosed is a little bit of a loaded word because you wouldn't want to be diagnosed. That's not the bridge. That's not going to do anything. What you would want to do is understand what components of your cognition are actually preventing you from succeeding academically here or anywhere. So I would say forget diagnosed and let's understand. And if we can democratize access to some sort of valid neuropsych, so a test that allows you to see what cognitive areas are the ones that you need to support, to strengthen in order to learn independently, that is more than half of your battle. And then once you know that, then you start pursuing the strengthening of these skills in order to prepare you to succeed. And we have quite a bit of literature on this, which I'd be happy to share directly with the person that sent the question or on our website, I guess.
Yeah. So okay, I'll maybe take it a slightly different direction. Let me give you a little bit of context. At University of Toronto Scarborough, where I teach, we're extremely multicultural, and so we have students coming, and a lot of immigrant students, but a lot of people who are second generation. And this is a slightly different tact, but I think maybe the same solution might apply. One of the challenges we have with these students is in some of their cultures, any form of, well, I'll take the extreme, let's say mental health, if they wanted to go to a health and wellness center to get some support for something. In some cultures that's seen as just, well, in the extreme, shameful, that you bring shame to your family if you're requiring some form of help. And so one of the techniques we've used, for example, to help students with things like social anxiety is to have workshops around public speaking, where we teach them the techniques, which are all really taken from therapeutic psychology, things like systematic desensitization, how to control your anxiety levels, how to do things, but we do it in this context that they and their family see as a valid context, an academic kind of context. So if that's the sort of thing being alluded to, then it's completely possible that the sort of support that Javier's team would provide, for example, could be an accessible way for somebody to get a better sense of where they are cognitively and where they have to improve without triggering some of those cultural things. Because just about every culture values education, and if this is going to help my child do better, it may be another approach to doing that.
Thank you. I think we have a question.
Hi, full disclosure, I work in IT here at the college. I'm Lori Rounds, the Deputy CIO for campus management services. I've been in IT my entire career, but I've also been an educator. I've taught as an adjunct at another community college. I think I have a comment and a question. I think that overall technology is very vendor-driven and is often oversold by these vendors, and institutions feel a lot of pressure to purchase systems or hardware, software, and everything over the course of my career I've seen come in became obsolete or didn't work, right, or didn't produce any results. And so I know there's a lot of universities that require students to come in with a laptop, or they're given a device. So, and there's a lot of private K-12 schools in the DC area that have one-to-one device to student programs. Can you comment on whether there's any research that has shown whether or not providing a one-to-one device is effective in aiding learning, or is it really more of a misnomer?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll make it first.
If you'd like, yeah.
Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so one of the things, so sometimes a technology gains a lot of support, for example, like using a tablet to do something because of the obvious engagement. So is there research that suggests that students enjoy these things and that they increase engagement and activity and active learning? Yes. But what we really care about is the result of all that engagement and active learning. Does it actually support deep learning? And that's, for example, in that area, we actually had a chat with some people from Apple and who are trying to get, of course, all Apple devices in every school. But their great challenge is they would have teachers that say, okay, my students have absolutely loved using GarageBand to create some assignment, but now what? What do I do with that? And I mean, I think this, I only say this to kind of give the complexity of the area, I think. One of our answers to that is, well, we usually had students writing something in this first step I talked about, but what if they use some application? And so we got that engagement, we got that creativity, nice open-ended environment, but then they have to now peer assess the work of their peers. And so we get the critical thinking and we get the communication, and then they have to respond to the feedback. So that replaces sort of the first step and is maybe more engaging than an essay would be. But I think we need the research to kind of come at it because of that complexity. And I know of no research that just suggests, oh yeah, you give everyone a device and suddenly learning is easy. There are practices people use on the devices that approach more of a Montessori kind of thing. So Montessori is everything's very hands-on. Sometimes that's difficult in a larger class, but if you have tablets, it's a virtual hands-on, so you can kind of go halfway. So like everything with technology, if it's used well, it's probably beneficial, but that's true of traditional education too, right? If it's done well. Yeah. So I mean, I would just say, I think that's why these issues of being pressured, so many technology companies, by the way, now contain an engineer and a business person. There's a bigger push now to educational institutions to actually look into who is behind this. And if there is no educational specialist that's part of the team, you should be very wary of any claims. And so I think that's going to be the new normal, where you're going to have that third person and you're going to have the research supporting the efficacy of the tool. And I think we need to demand that. We will not buy a tool unless we know it works.
We'll try to get in two more questions quickly. I have a question from Facebook, then I'll come to the final one from the floor. This one is pretty simple. What can be done for students, for MC students? No, sorry. Each decade we hear about flavor of the month strategies to increase student motivation, persistence, and success. What is new, if anything, about neuroscience? How should Montgomery College approach this issue?
New is not necessarily what we're chasing. I think what works is what matters, even if it's old. So if we've mastered everything that works, new is nice to have if it works. First, I think ensure that what you know works is what you're doing. And what research shows is that over 90% of educators across this country are typically not versed in cognitive science. And understanding how our brains learn greatly impacts our students' ability to learn. So it's no coincidence that Professor Joordens gets Professor of the Year. He's cheating, right? He's mastered the topic. He knows how to teach with their brains in mind. if we could all emulate part of what he's doing, then regardless of what we're teaching, we would improve our outcomes. So I love it when I meet a cognitive scientist that happens to be the university's greatest teacher. That just proves my point. If they study how we learn, they're more likely to teach in accordance with those principles. So I think replicating these things is what we are trying to do together, actually, and that's what's really exciting. So I hope I didn't evade the question.
Okay. No, that's
I think I'm more a fan of doing what works well than chasing what's new.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a last question from a faculty member on the right.
Hi, I'm John Hammond, Dean of Math here. Right, I want to follow up on what Javier was just saying about this idea of teaching and learning. And those two things are, at least to me, slightly separate. Like, I mean, one of the problems that I have is I learn a little bit about how students learn. I try to teach to that method, you know, and I think I get some success out of that. But then the students think, oh, well, it's just because you're a good teacher, not because they have become better learners. Right? And what we really want to do is what you said before, you know, get them to be lifelong learners, to really own that learning. So how do we separate the good teaching from the good learning that we're trying to encourage students to do?
I remember it wasn't long ago when I started teaching. Actually, it wasn't long ago. But anyway, when a lot of the debate that was discussed was, is teaching a science or an art? And there was a large group of people who said there are good teachers and there are not so good teachers, and it's just something about what they do, just like there's good actors and not good actors, perhaps, something like that. I've certainly seen that shift, where not to say that there isn't an art, there probably isn't everything, but there's certainly a science. There's a lot of data to suggest that certain things work. I mean, I can give you a very simple example. One of the things we did in this big MOOC that I taught was we should have a name. We should talk to each other about it. And because we were people feeding on our own minds, we called ourselves cognitive cannibals. And then I said, well, we should have like a flag. Does anybody here design? And somebody designed a flag and a logo, and we did all this. And then since then, if you look at Twitter feeds for hashtag cognitive cannibals, they embraced that and became a community. So this is a very simple, this is not new, you know, we're back to them, but having the group do something together and come up with some sort of identity makes them all closer and warmer. And there are so many of these principles that are in the literature that, in my opinion, we just haven't mobilized well. And it's people like you mobilizing these things and trying them out. To the student, they might, I mean, I'm very open. I try to explain everything I'm doing to a student and why. So here's why we're community building. This will make you feel, but, and I think maybe that's sort of the key, to let them look behind the cloth in the what's that green thing? Wizard of Oz kind of way? Green thing.
I just want to get in one more question
please,
from
sorry,
Twitter,
Tom.
because remember, we are going to move to Science 152. There's a reception. You're all invited. We could continue the conversation there. I'm sure, or I'm hoping. A student asks, he's having issues succeeding in college and would like to know if you have any tips.
That is...
Where to begin?
Yeah, where to begin, because the root of your struggle has to be as unique as you are. And to give you a standardized canned solution violates everything that I have said here today. But I don't want to undermine the importance of what the student is asking. I think it would be incredibly presumptuous for me to give him a recipe in 30 seconds. So I will say, email me, javier@cogx.info, and let's talk, and I'll try to help. Yeah.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We've come to that point. I want to thank our speakers for their participation. I'd like to thank our special guest, the faculty and our student. And I want to thank you, the audience, for coming, because without you, this event could not have been a success. I'll now invite Dr. Pollard to come up and say a few closing remarks before we make it a wrap.
Well, let me first say thank you all so much. Such a provocative and engaging conversation. I spent much of our conversation thinking about this very powerful work we do as community college educators. This idea that we have cognitively diverse students and we need to meet them where they are. That was a major takeaway for me, but also that deep learning comes from the fact that you have a rich content mastery And at the same time, you have to be able to convey that to students in ways that is accessible for them. I have been profoundly moved by this and also affirmed in this work that we do as community college educators, whatever role we have. One of our colleagues tweeted, faculty, staff, everyone has a role in the student learning process. So thank you for being here today. Thank our phenomenal guests for making us think. And I hope that you enjoyed this innovation forum. And I really want to thank the Presidential Innovation Leadership Institute. You all have started something that I think can be very powerful for our own institutional learning. I know it took us a while to make sure that we did it right and did it the right way, but I think we are going from a wonderful place from this point forward.